Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. I'm your host, Samuel McCullough, and today we have Amplis, who has just shocked me to the core with his upgrade to his video here. This is incredible. I've never seen anything like this before.
What's up?
What's going on?
The mouth movement still needs some work. We're still working on that, but yeah.
I would say that this who was the other two guys that had the kind of like it was like anime backgrounds with the animated people that would follow the
Are they anatas? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the anatas.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of anatas on, but this is like way cooler just because of the skull moon in the background.
Oh, that's just like a GIF in the background.
It's
not
so
even
dope.
Yeah.
And then we also have Dio here today, and I'm going to run through his full title here. Dio Brands of the House of YieldNest, first of his name, the Unwrecked, King of DeFi, and the first Degens, Call of the Llamas, Protector of the Seven Yields, and Father of Restaking, and the Breaker of Chains.
Amazing. All the honor goes to Pim the Battle Llama. We were talking about some stuff about YieldNest and some strategies, and he was like, use this as your bio. I was like, yes, we're going to do
that. So things have been pretty crazy this past day. We've seen an incredible amount of liquidations from Renzo. And Renzo is an LRT platform. And maybe Dio, what's the difference between like an LSD and an LRT in how they're designed right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a very big difference, right? With an LSD, you're basically securing the Ethereum network. With a LRT or an LRT, there's different types. You're securing the Ethereum network and other things beyond that. So with an LSD, there is less risk involved. With an LRT, there's much more risk involved, even beyond all the leverage farming and stuff that was happening. But like beyond that, the risk spectrum increases, but that also means that the potential yield and stuff is also increasing. So it's basically LSD securing the Ethereum network and LRT securing the Ethereum network with an LRT plus other protocols or networks.
Yeah, and so all these LRTs have essentially been farming eigenlayer points. That's what people have been using them for. They've probably collected a total of $10 billion, maybe a little bit more than that, across the entire spectrum. And there's a few big ones. EtherFi is, I believe, the biggest. Renzo is the second biggest. And I've got the chart here. Renzo has been able to grow up to about $3.3 billion just in the space of 4 months from the beginning of 2024. Same goes for the other LRTs as well, too. They've just been massively growing because the yields that people are expecting from the eigenlayer airdrop, I think, are pretty high. People are expecting probably like 100% yield for this like 4-month period or 5-month period that eigenlayer has been running. Yeah. So anyways, there's several different flavors of LRTs, and specifically for Renzo, you would take your LSDs that you have, you deposit it into Renzo, and then Renzo deposits it into eigenlayer, is the way that I understand it. Some of these LRTs have withdrawal features, so you can actually pull your LSDs back in case you want to get collateral back. In the case of Renzo, you couldn't. And I think this was like a well-known fact across the entire market, but it led to the liquidations that we had today. Dio's got this up as well too. Yeah, here.
Yeah, so the different tokens, I think it's good to highlight that, right? Like the Renzo is a mix of an NLRT and LRT, right? Where an NLRT basically you use beacon chain ETH, you spin up validators and you restake the validators, or you use liquid restaking tokens like ETH or staked ETH or other or staked Frax ETH or whatever you want to use, and then you restake that, or you could even use any ERC20s actually in the future, right? It's a space that is about to even get 10 times more crazy, but we'll get probably back into that later in the show. But yeah, these differences are, I think important to understand. Yeah.
Right. So coming into today, people had been farming Renzo with the expectation that there was going to be a pretty sizable airdrop. I think that with the expectations of close to $4 billion or $3.3 billion worth of capital coming into Renzo, I think people were hoping for a lot. And yesterday, the Renzo people came out and they published this chart, which may like probably the worst pie chart abuse we've seen in a long time. We can see that 31.5% is going to fundraising, another 30% to the community, 20% to the team, 13% to the foundation, and then 2.5% to the launch pool and 2.5% to liquidity. But what's crazy about this pie chart is that the 2.5% here is huge. This is not 5% in the pie chart. They definitely fudged the lines a little bit. Yeah. And I actually have a better pie chart here. Here's a more accurate pie chart that we just posted on Twitter. This is more representative of what actually is being distributed here. And really, in this case, you have about 5% that's going to be liquid at the beginning. And then the other 95% is just essentially going to be controlled by the team in some respect. And it raised a lot of anger from crypto Twitter as people, because this is not like a regular airdrop, right? This is essentially people coming in, having provided liquidity for a long period of time, in this space, 4 months, and essentially getting 2% for the 4 or 5 months by providing a couple of $1 billion. And the claims that I was seeing was that for this amount of capital that came in, we essentially made Renzo what it is. Like, Renzo is as big as it is because of the massive amount of liquidity that was added here by other people. And in response to that, they're getting 2%.
Yeah, and also important to highlight is that they didn't activate withdrawals, right? And it's very normal for a new LSD or LRT to not have withdrawals in the beginning because you need to initiate the protocol, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. But like when you release the TGE or governance token of that protocol, I think before you do that, you should definitely enable withdrawals, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have a question. So from a technical perspective, right? Enabling withdrawals is it just something that they could just have they not done it for business reasons, or have they not enabled withdrawal because it's technically difficult and they just haven't gotten around to it yet?
It's technically, in the Eigenlayer sense, quite a little bit more difficult than just an LSD.
Right, because there's a 7-day withdrawal period for Eigenlayer or something.
And you need to also validate all the different. So in order in Eigenlayer to do natively restaking, you need to generate proofs of your validator, right? And that's very good that Eigenlayer does that, because that means that with these proofs, you can actually then run AVSs and you can prove that it's actually validated with money, right? So I think it's good, but it would be even better. They should just activate withdrawal. It's not as easy. It's not super easy to activate withdrawals, actually. But it's something, if you have $3 billion of TVL, you should be able to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so the risk here with having so much TVL is that during sell-offs, there might not be enough liquidity to handle the amount of spot and leveraged selling that's going to take place. And that's what happened yesterday. So I believe it was at midnight my time, so just a few hours ago, there was a sell-off of Renzo's Easy ETH on the DEXs, and prices just tanked. On some of the DEXs, the price went down to $700, which is almost a third of what the ETH price is. And if you looked at what the oracles did, it went down about 10%, I believe. I've got the Redstone Oracle here. So in 1 hour, it was trading at 32.42, and then it hit a low of 3,000. So that 10% swing on the oracles set off a liquidation cascade across Gearbox, Morpho Labs, and I believe there's one other place on Blast as well too, where the people who were leveraged long on Renzo, essentially farming the points, got liquidated. And I believe there was about like 12,000 ETH, 12,000 Renzo ETH that was liquidated during this time period. And this is kind of all in response. So season 1 had just ended, and now they had come out with this airdrop, essentially saying we're only going to give 2% away, and that caused people to essentially rotate out. And they did it in quick fashion, and it led to this sell-off. I think there's also some uproar as well too, because the Renzo team also said that NFT holders of Miladies and Schizo posters are going to get 2% of the 5% airdrop. And so people weren't happy. And so they started to dump Renzo, and it led to wide scale liquidations across the board. I've got the Gearbox chart here. Gearbox had about, it lost about 50% of its Renzo TVL in just a couple of minutes here as the liquidations happen. And Amplis, what actually happened over at Gearbox?
So, well, firstly, I want to say, like, anything I do say, if it sounds unsympathetic, particularly to users of leverage, that's my personal opinion and not the official opinion of Gearbox Protocol. Just gonna say that. I think if you're using leverage, if you get liquidated, like, that's the game you're playing, right? That's fair game. With regards to, well, firstly, let's talk about Renzo. So I think the chart was like not that chart was not bullish. I think that's chart crime, and like more than the distribution, just the clear 25%, whereas like the actual percentage is like 30 plus, is that should not be allowed, and whoever made that chart should be fired. So that's the first thing. Just for chart crime, not talking about the distribution. Don't so much care about that. With regards to withdrawals, I think it's a fair point that, like, okay, before the TGE, you should enable withdrawals. On the other hand, this has happened to Lido before, right? Like, obviously, Lido had a bigger problem with withdrawals because they needed to wait for like mainnet protocol stuff to enable withdrawals, but they had the token and they had DPEGs before too on staked ETH. So like, I think there's outrage about the token distribution for Renzo, and then separately there's these criticisms about enabling withdrawals, the possibility of a DPEG because of like whatever amount of liquidity they have, but those things actually should be separated. Like, you can have a kind of how you're managing easy ETH discussion, and then you can have a token distribution discussion, but those things shouldn't necessarily be kind of connected together to any great extent. And then so that's my thoughts on Renzo. In terms of Gearbox, I think, like, if you're using leverage, like, there's risk, right? I was using leverage, I almost got liquidated, and if I had gotten liquidated, I'd be like, well, that's the game we're playing. Like, you don't get kind of 5x points or 10x points or whatever without any risk. I will say Gearbox performed almost exactly as intended, in the sense of it 100% protected the passive lenders, and the people who took on the most risk on the leverage side were liquidated. I think the cutoff point was about 5x, right? So if you're below 5x leverage, you probably would have been fine. I was just about at 5x leverage, so I was just fine. But you know, if you look at our comms, we're often like, it's up to 9x leverage, and then there's normally like a brackets. We don't recommend you do 9x leverage because in any like tiny DPEG situation, you'll get liquidated. Close brackets. So like, it's not like we haven't warned users about kind of overdoing it on the leverage points thing. So yeah, I think, like, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's my kind of take on this kind of thing. In the same way as if you're like leverage trading and you get a bad wick, you're going to get liquidated as well, right? It's the same principle. And the whole point of Gearbox to me is about like users get to choose how much leverage they use. It's not a vault where like the amount of leverage is fixed at 2x or 5x or 10x, whatever. It's like you can choose your risk level, you can choose what to apply leverage to, and then it's up to you to kind of control your own destiny, manage your own risk, blah blah blah. Like we're not here to, well, I'm not here to dumb it down for people. Like I believe in self-sovereignty, and self-sovereignty comes with responsibility, right? Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts. Again, I'm not speaking for the whole protocol because I don't want to get fired. But yeah, like, protocol, Gearbox actually performed pretty well. Like I said, passive lenders were protected. There were a good number of liquidations on the leverage side. The one thing I will say is there was a pause in the protocol because our risk system is basically, we're like, obviously the risk system doesn't think for itself, but the idea is like, if there's a certain amount of movement, it's like, okay, is this some kind of hack where we need to pause the protocol? So there was a pause. And because of that pause, it's possible that some users were not able to, through the UI, right? You could still do it on chain, but like through the UI, you couldn't kind of add more collateral. Those users will be like compensated if they were liquidated for that reason. Like if you're liquidated in that period where the protocol was paused because we thought, our risk systems were like, this could be like some kind of hack. If you're liquidated because of that, then yeah, there will be some kind of compensation for you from the protocol. But by and large, I think like Gearbox actually handled this pretty well. This has happened to us before too with the staked ETH DPEG. I don't know, like in just after FTX, I think is when that happened, like early bear. And it's a similar thing, right? Like, and I think I said the same thing at that time. It's like, yeah, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, how much did staked ETH depeg then? It was like 10%, went down to like 89.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So like if you base on the art, like if you base it compared to the way that the oracles that we use perform, it was pretty similar, right? Like Redstone, Chainlink. And also like the other thing I'll say is like this wasn't some kind of weird flash crash. Like it happened because people didn't want to hold easy ETH anymore, and they sold it because, you know what I mean? It wasn't like some kind of freak flash loan hack like manipulation thing. It was like there was less demand for this asset, so people sold it, and that led to a real price decrease
into liquidity as well.
Yeah. So, and like our oracles, I think, also handled it pretty well. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it.
I think at the end of the day, like Gearbox is a tool, right? And so like it's not Gearbox's fault that Easy ETH depegged. Like it's Easy ETH's and Renzo protocols, fault for encouraging people to farm points at, massive amounts with inadequate mechanisms to unravel that, and inadequate liquidity across chains, so you got to be careful. And it also makes you wonder, what's going to happen with some of these other liquid staking tokens as soon as the points meta dries up. Are people going to, flash sell them? And so, like I mentioned, DCF God had a good post. Like, here's some lessons learned for other LSTs. Like, make sure you have redemptions possible before you stop your points program or release your tokens, because people are going to dump the asset. And if you cause liquidation cascades, then people are going to get liquidated.
Yeah, isn't that 101? Like, isn't that like, sorry, but like, is it like, I agree, of course, let's learn from that. But like, isn't that kind of like what we, I mean, points are kind of new, I guess. I don't know. They're not really new, but isn't it 101 that, you initiate a protocol, you build up TVL, and then at some point when you do something that could go either direction, right? It could go good or bad. You just activate withdrawals. I think it's very basic. You do that at some point, right? But
yeah. Yeah. But, I had also commented like, farm us, take out a loan and farm us. Then as soon as like everything hits the fan, like, why'd you degens do that? Like, why would anyone farm like this?
I think it's also a little bit the point system that was encouraging it, right? Like, I think it's not the fault of Gearbox or Pendle or whatever protocols affected by this. I think the from a perspective of like, hey, let's incentivize looping things. Like, there should be some warning signs, like, hey, yeah, you loop, you get some extra incentives for whatever reason, and then but have a clear warning. And I think that's not the responsibility of Gearbox or other protocols. They're just Gearbox fulfills a clear function, and Brendel, etc. They fulfill clear functions. I think it's at the core protocol to be like, hey, if you want to use your token in this way, you can do that here, but be careful because this protocol's function is XYZ, right?
Yeah. And like, I think on Blast, some people got hurt if they entered the Easy ETH token while it was like over peg. But I can't remember. I don't understand the exact mechanics, to be honest, but it like collateralizes or increases the LP like by the way you use it. So, I mean, the liquidity on, I think it's Juice Finance on Blast is like 160 million for Easy ETH WETH pair. So like, maybe that's an interesting solution for some of these LSTs to look into rather than having like 3 mil on Uniswap.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a type of stablecoin in some effect, and I think that we've seen this before with the LSDs. Rapsteth having its depeg down to 89 cents, and protocols have designed for this. I mean, this is one of the things that the Frax team has done really well, is focused on liquidity first before focusing on like asset growth, right? Like, I believe that you could sell like 10% or 15% of all the Frax ETH in existence through the curve pool, and it would only affect it maybe like 0.5% or something like that. So, liquidity is the biggest function here, especially in these big volatile events. And there's seems to be a culmination of just a ton of crazy things that are added here. I was just seeing that in addition to this points announcement coming out, there's also $1 billion worth of PT tokens that are maturing on Pendle in like the next day or so.
Yeah, there's PT WE ETH or whatever, or EETH is like in 7 hours or something like that.
Yeah, and there's about $100 million worth of Easy ETH that's maturing as well too. So everything kind of culminated in this like one spot where there was massive demand for exit to rotate into something else, and it just caused this spot selling into a leveraged liquidity cascade. And I think the thing to focus on with Gearbox is that at the end of the day, the passive providers were not harmed, which is what you want, right? You kind of have to choose, like, what's our model going to be? And I think Mark Zeller was saying this in Lobsters, that you either have to choose if, users can lose money if the safety model doesn't do its job, or in the other model, just people lose money. And so in this case, the Gearbox safety module worked. I think there was some, like you said, because of the pausing, there was some issues with being liquidated that way, which you guys are taking care of. But in effect, everything worked. I think there was,
I also think, well, I have two more things to say, I guess. One thing about points is, like, putting aside Renzo specifically, I think the points meta is bad in one particular sense, and that is when people find out how much their points are worth, that immediately, like, everybody's doing math at the same time, and then if the math is a certain way, adds up a certain way, everybody's going to take the same action, right? So, like, with Renzo, it happened that, like, people were not happy with the return they got on their points or whatever. Then everybody did the math and then took the same action, which is to stop farming, right? Which is kind of what caused this initial sell-off, which then caused the cascade. But, like, more broadly, theoretically, right? If you think about, like, eigenlayer points, if for example they're like, eigenlayer points, the token is not going to be distributed like linearly, but rather it's going to be based on tiers, right? So, like, if you're between this tier and this tier of points, then you get this number of tokens. Like, if that kind of situation happens, like similar, like not necessarily like there would be a liquidation cascade with eigenlayer, but like basically everybody might be like, okay, we're not farming eigenlayer anymore because the distribution didn't work out the way that we wanted, right? And that is both the power and the downside of points. Is like, yes, you get to control how your token is distributed a little bit better, and for a little bit longer. But on the other hand, when you finally make that decision to like, okay, this is how the points convert to tokens, then like everybody is looking at the same math at the same time, which can cause other kinds of problems in your protocol. So that's the thing on points. On Gearbox, like, I think, I don't know if you guys know who Brian Kaplan is. Brian Kaplan is like this economist guy who like has a bunch of hot takes about various things. But one of the things he says is like, if your regulation is so stringent that like in an earthquake, no buildings collapse, then like you're over-regulated, right? You want some level of regulation where like, yes, there's like a couple of handful of buildings collapse in an earthquake. That's the correct amount of regulation. You don't want all the buildings to collapse, obviously, right? But you don't want no buildings to collapse. And like, not that I'm saying that's the Gearbox founders' philosophy. I like honestly don't know exactly how they think about these things. But the way that I think about what Gearbox should be doing, like we have to be on the kind of leading edge of what people want to take risk on, right? And it's not for us to decide what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. We can look at code and we can be like, this is safer, this is less safe. But if the market as a whole decides that something like Easy ETH or something like USDE or like Athena or anything else really, like if there's demand for it, then as a protocol, it's kind of our job to enable, like what we do is provide leverage. We want to provide leverage for all of DeFi that's like broadly accepted. If people broadly accept a range of different DeFi things, then like it's our goal, in fact, to provide leverage for those things. And you know, if a few buildings collapse, like we're doing the right thing, kind of thing, right? We're like at the right level of riskiness in terms of what we're integrating and blah blah blah. That's kind of how I feel about it. So yeah, don't know if that makes any sense.
And I would say as well. Oh, sorry, go for it, Sam.
I think I just want to get your guys' ideas here on this. Is that we've kind of, with the point meta, abstracted away the pool 2 into this, oh hey, you're going to get something in a future date. And so the pool 2 becomes something that you have to have a third-party market for, like Whales Market, instead of just directly distributing tokens to people. And I don't know if that's a better system at the end of the day. Like you were saying that it gives you more ability to distribute your points, but at the same time, the pool 2 distributions really allowed people to do the math like in the moment at pretty much every block by block, based on the price and everything else, instead of having this abstracted, ethereal, well, we kind of have to guess on what points are going to be and what liquidity is going to be in the future.
Yeah, but that's by design, right? Like it depends on what your goals are as a protocol. If your goals are to maximize TVL, for example, then points totally make sense. Yeah. Like if your goal is something else, then you know, then the correct solution is something else. But I think from like Eigenlayer's perspective, right? Like points have been absolutely like a huge marketing win or a BD win or whatever, because it's meant that their TVL has like gotten really, really high. They got loads and loads of users. So like if you think about it from that perspective, like what is your goal as a protocol, especially a protocol that's like just started, that's just launched or whatever. If your goal is to get as many users as possible, then points totally make sense, because like points offer the promise of anything. And because nobody can sell, I mean, people can sell points in Whales Market, but that's a pain, right? Because there's not like a clear token price. It's not like you can do clear math of what your APYs are. So then the APYs are like, could be infinite. And that's what's drawing people in. And yeah, it's a bit of a marketing gimmick, kind of. But like from the protocol's perspective, it totally makes sense to do this. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Can we talk about like the current token distribution meta? Because I want to come back to that, because Renzo's just another one of these that we've seen, where it's like low float, high FTV, and you know they're putting what 5% liquid at the beginning,
And
That's
this has really become like the norm and the standard across all major projects that are in the kind of $1 billion range. And I don't know if it's great for like the wider retail community. You know, it's great for the teams. It's great for the VCs who are essentially able to boost their valuations this high. But the market has to absorb all this new supply that's going to come in at some point. And events like these, and you know, other liquidity events, like what happens when Eigenlayer goes, nobody really knows what its valuation is going to be. There seems to be like a disconnect between what the market actually should have, which is a higher float, tending toward like lower FTVs that can grow over time. If you look back at the last cycle, like one of the things that led to people making so much money is that all of the big winners from 2021, 2022, like Solana, like Phantom, like, I don't know, a bunch of other projects during that time period, Avalanche, they had something like over 50% of the supply was distributed within the first 6 months. And so, and the FTVs are really low at the time. So people were able to allocate into these, you know, high liquidity, high float situations, and then the prices go up rather than starting at an incredibly high FTV and then having huge amounts of supply coming in to the market as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
yeah.
so I have to go real soon, so I'm just gonna chime in one last thing, and then you guys can bitch about Gearbox all you want after I go.
No, I think you guys did a great job. Like, look, at the end of the day, all the passive providers were saved, right? And that's what you want.
I think on the high FTV, low float thing, like it's totally spot on. I think like we're seeing kind of backlash against it on, well, at least on my CT timeline. But like I think Fiscantes talked about this, a bunch of other people have talked about this. It's like, number one, this is partially why like meme coins have taken off, right? Because like VCs bitching about meme coins, fine. Like I understand why you'd be frustrated, but you're the one who created this condition where the deck is like literally stacked against you. You're buying a coin that you had no access to, that some VC got in the seed, right? Then you're literally buying, like you buying is literally 100xing for them or whatever. And like that natural distribution is, you know, it's a quote unquote unfair game, right? Whereas like if you're buying a meme coin that launched and you could have aped like when it launched, that's like theoretically a fair game, even if the coin itself has no kind of inherent value or whatever. So you know, I think that the whole meme coin thing is a phenomenon is thanks to this kind of high FDV thing. The other thing is like I think there's a lot of validity to the idea that like actually maybe something like ICOs or something like I think it's called Fjord or whatever is a more appropriate way in crypto. At least it's more kind of fair, and like because like the ICO era brought so many scams, we kind of like turned away from that entirely. But as a funding mechanism that is maybe more democratic, I mean, it's definitely more democratic than what we have now. And like what we have now is a direct result of people not wanting to use these other mechanisms because they're seen as kind of tarnished because there were loads of scams, right? But in some ways, like letting VCs dump on retail is just as much of a scam as any of those things. So yeah, that's kind of something to think about. Yeah, okay, I have to go. Hopefully, yeah, Gearbox passive lenders were totally safe. If you guys want to bitch about us, now is your time. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully Ivan doesn't fire me for anything that I said.
You're not an intern. You're safe.
Cardio.
Yeah, speaking of Renzo, they gave Milady and Schizo posters, but no Remelia. Shame for us Remelia holders.
No base schools either for Amplus.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just two business models, right? I was talking with some market makers also about like, yeah, well, this but why is nobody talking about this FTV? Everybody's talking about, wow, I got a $4,000 airdrop or this airdrop or this and that, and well, did you check the FTV? People don't seem to really talk about it, so I'm happy that topic comes up. And I think healthy projects would actually start with a lower market cap and then slowly find price discovery. If you have a long-term view, you also don't really want your token to dump that hard, right? You want your token to find price discovery in the market, I believe. So long-term projects, I think, won't really do that, in my opinion. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I mean, LBPs haven't found it either quite yet. I mean, part of the problem is that there's still a lot of people buying pre-LBP and getting, you know, an instant 5 to 10x based on the LBP price. And the other problem that I think may exist with LBPs is that the token, like when you have 5 million of buying pressure in an LBP that artificially lowers the price or keeps the price at a certain point, and then you put it on the market, who's left to buy? You know, and so you kind of exhaust your natural price finding, and then you put it on the market, and everyone that expects it to 2x doesn't get that, and then they start to dump it.
Huh.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. And that just is if there was a higher amount of if there was a higher float for these LBPs instead of just doing like 5 to 15% of what they normally do.
Then it probably wouldn't be as much of a problem.
The market dynamics would be a lot better. Like if they were doing 80% of the tokens into the LBP, I know that kind of like kills future token emissions, but at least if you have a functioning protocol where there's revenues that can come in from some sort of activity, you know, it's slower. It's based more on fundamentals, but at least there's more upside for everyone. Yeah.
And then make it worse and let the, you know, VCs stake their tokens for emission, their locked tokens for emissions. That's the other new meta that has come around this market. It's like, yeah, your tokens are vesting, but you can stake them and get just as many emissions as if they weren't vesting.
Can you guys name off the top of your head anything that's been extremely low float, which is done well over a multi-year time period?
What do you mean by that? Like,
I mean, these like low float releases, right, where they do like 2 to 5%, 10% or whatever. Are there any? Can you think of anything off the top of your head which is done like well, like where, you know, if you bought at the beginning, then you're essentially seeing like decent returns over that period?
No,
I honestly
I'm struggling.
Like even in this cycle, the big winners have been like Aerodrome, Velodrome, which had months and months of token farming and distributions at an extremely low valuation, and then eventually, once they hit product market fit, everything kind of went off after that.
Well, don't show the Aerodrome holders the Velo market cap and coin price charts side to side. I mean, Aerodrome still has a lot of emissions to go through. I mean, look at ARB. You know, I mean, arguably a really well-run layer 2, but I mean, they have still huge admissions. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Their market cap is 3 billion and a fully diluted valuation of 11 billion. I mean, I'm an ARB guy. I'm rooting for them, but I mean, the price sucks, you know, and I can't remember what the latest unlock was. It was like $2 billion worth of coin, you know, and the price went from, granted, the whole market corrected, but man, ARB corrected like 60%.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. I hope we start to see more. I mean, it doesn't, like, if you're trying to maximize value for whatever project you're building, you want the highest amount of FDV with the lowest amount of float, just so, and the highest amount of team tokens going towards yourself. Like in this case, I'm going to bring back up this thing, which Doug Toshti posted.
I mean, it all goes to show, like, what are you maximizing for, right? Are you maximizing for a long-term kind of thing, what you're trying to build, or is it just like a short-term money grab? And yeah, these meme coins and the current narrative is very short-term minded. But luckily enough, like there's also a lot of really pockets that go much deeper, and people are thinking much longer term. And actually, the whole LRT space is like super exciting and interesting. I was just listening this morning to Empire, a really good show about like AVSs and LRTs, and what are we going to see in the future? How are all these AVSs managed? How are we going to segregate yields? How is it going to work? Because probably with AVSs, we'll probably need to log up for certain periods of time. How are we categorizing the like all these questions are kind of unanswered, and I don't see any of these LRT protocols, instead of just leverage farming and just putting their users there, like maybe try to look into this longer term vision of like, what are we actually doing here? Like it's not really about point farming, right? Like it's more about like doing a modular security stack and trying to decentralize more of our infrastructure. And
well,
how
hey,
do we
you're talking about fundamentals here, Dio.
Yeah, and I'm still a fundamental investor, actually. Like I still believe that our current fiat system is broken and we need to find a better solution. It's an evolution from a rotten fiat system to something new, and we have to protect ourselves. And this is a sovereign money layer that will save people that are smart, I guess. But yeah, we have to.
But if you look at just looking at pricing, and we'll kind of wrap up here, and then we can talk about YieldNest after this, is that if you look at the like DeFi 1.0 protocols that came out, so Aave, Frax, Maker, everybody that has had a significant amount of emissions, and people understand where they fit in the market, they have deep analytics on all of their assets and how they're being used. They've not performed in the same way that these new shiny things have. And yeah, well, I think it's just one of those things where the market, unfortunately, people are so hype driven that
it's fine.
Yeah, no, I understand it's fine.
I said it's from meme. It's going from meme. It's going from memes goes to meme reverting, right? Mean reverting. So I think we will at some point that it's going to be like, oh, this MakerDAO thing is making a lot of revenue. Oh, this Frax FXS is doing amazing. Like the Frax chain and everything that Sam is working on is amazing. Like Curve is actually shipping a lot of really cool stuff. There's a lot of fundamentals that are actually looking okay, right?
Yeah, Curve has never made more money on a week-to-week basis than it has been recently.
Just stick to your thesis as a value investor. Like, stick to your thesis. Like, try to understand this market. And the world is moving to like digital ledgers. Banks are ledgers. Crypto is here to stay, and blue chip DeFi will see its light. Will thrive, I think, at some point. But it's just now with all these memes and all these new things and all these like, oh, this is hot, that's hot, like make it 10x. Well, yeah, sure, but that's kind of risky, right? And there is this more like DeFi that kind of at some point will pump, because a lot of these now older DeFi coins like FXS or CRV or even MKR maybe a little bit less, but all these other coins they're trading almost one-to-one to their underlying yields, right? I think Curve is even trading below that at this point. So at some point that hype will come back in that sector as well, right? The multiples that we're used to.
Yeah. It's hard to like properly value anything that hasn't gone through a cycle yet.
Yeah. I mean, like look at the stuff that survives, cycle to cycle, and you're fine if you're in those, but you don't know until that long bear comes what actually will survive for sure. But certainly people
new things will not survive. And the ED, Aave, CRV, MKR, these things are surviving. They're sticking through, and all their bugs are being resolved. This code is getting very hardened, and then with restaking AVSs, we're going to make it multi-chain, and it's going to be all interoperable. And it's like software is going to be built in like little Lego blocks, right? That's kind of like the whole vision from the start of DeFi. Like, hey, we have this Lego blocks, and we can build this new financial system, and it's actually happening. We're doing it, right? But it just takes some time.
And to your point, look at the teams that are looking long term, not trying to only pump their token for the next 9 months in peak bulla. Look at the teams that are building for sustainability. One more thing I wanted to mention on the whole DPEG and LSTs is, the other thing is for people who like to look for arbitrages like me. Granted, missed it, but it was not a good time, my time zone. But I mean, you had a great chance if you thought or were confident that Easy ETH would either repeg or offer redemptions. I mean, at one point you could have scooped it at almost half the price. And then shortly thereafter, knock-on effects, Vector ETH also depegged like 20%. So their opportunities continue to exist in the nascent DeFi marketplace. And sometimes these protocol mistakes are other people's, opportunity.
Yeah, my question will be like, what happens to all these LRT protocols once the like fixed yield on Pendle drops from 30% down to 5% again?
Right. Don't be the last PT holder.
And I think it's also
April expiry, not the September.
Protocols should better educate, right? Like, why push everybody into these PT farms and give them points? Maybe be a little bit more mindful, right? Like, all these protocols are saying that, long-term this, long-term that, but really, like, if you give so much points to leverage the shit out of something that doesn't generate any real yield yet, like, sounds very dangerous to me.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this in the like the LSD like change rates. I'm just going to bring up DeFi Llama here. There's been a huge exodus out of some of the LSDs. Like FraxETH is down 24% on the supply in the past 30 days. Stakestone is down 40%. So Mantle is down 8. Swell is down 6. So there's really been a lot of people that have just been swapping to these LRTs to chase yield, because these LSDs are making what, like 3-4%, but the LRTs are offering, I don't know, 100% APR right now if you're playing things right.
And Stakestone's a great example. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, probably the reason they're down 40% in the last 30 is because whatever chain, Manta chain, you were locked. If you had Stakestone over there, if you transferred ETH over there to farm, locked up, and then they unlocked everybody. And so it was an arbitrage opportunity too. And like, no one actually wanted Stakestone. They just knew it was backed. So they went and bought Stakestone over there. And then as soon as they opened redemptions, everybody left it. And so like, protocols need to arb themselves or be arbed too. There's too many smart players in DeFi with too much capital. Like, people will arb a, tens of millions of dollar project if you let them.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think what Gearbox had said before, right? I forgot his name, but yeah, it's a free market should have a little bit of these tumbles, and I think it's great. So we're just innovating and at a light speed, very fast, very quick, and I think it's all good. It's all net positive. I think, I feel it's net positive. Yeah.
Well, speaking about positive, let's talk about YieldNest because it's what we came on to talk about today. I want to say first, congratulations to you, Dio. You guys just wrapped up a 5.2 million contribution round with investors like Winthrop and C2 from Convex, Michael Yagora from Curve, Algorand, Conic, and a bunch of other people as well too. So congratulations on the raise.
Thank you.
And so you guys are building a AVS restaking platform as well too. So maybe you can talk about it. Like, what is it, and how's it going to differentiate itself from some of the other actors on the market right now?
Yeah, well, so I've been building in the LRT space for some time now, even before the whole point farming was this whole thing. And I was more focused on the longer term vision of like liquid restaking, modular security, and exporting crypto economic security to different layers of the DeFi stack, right? I just see it as a natural evolution of like, okay, now we have this base layer Ethereum that we're making this. We have base layer Ethereum, and it's just like it has a certain functionality because we have a general ledger. Like, it's similar how there's a reason why the current banking system also works with, like, we have the Bank of International Settlements, we have the central bank, and then there's commercial banks around that kind of like very quickly give out mortgages or stuff, and then it settles all back to the central bank kind of system, right? And that takes in the traditional world, it takes 2 weeks. And I think in restaking we can actually export the crypto economic security to a lot of different layers and a lot of different applications. Not only blockchain related applications, but also AI interfaces or instant dispute resolutions for insurance companies, policies. So it's quite a big thing, and I think it's going to be very interesting, and it's going to mesh together this whole modular DeFi stack that we're now having with all these different chains. And I think restaking is going to be a big part of the next wave in decentralized finance, I believe.
Yeah. So where are you guys falling in? I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, the difference between like native liquid restaking tokens and then also liquid restake tokens. Where does YieldNest fit in all of that?
Yeah, so basically what we're building is we're building liquid restaking tokens. We're building a natively liquid restaking token, and it is a normal liquid restaking tokens to kind of like enter the different positions. And then we're building categories of things you can restake to. Categories of, like, we call them AVS categories. And an AVS on a restake protocol like Eigenlayer or other protocols is an active validated service that kind of validates or like performs functions where you restake to, right? And we're categorizing these different AVS categories, like, you know, you could have AI, rollups, DeFi, different protocols. You know, like there's many things we can do with crypto economic security that we're sharing throughout the ether. And we're categorizing that, and we're isolating these things, and we're trying to build like kind of structured products around these different LRTs so that people can actually either restake in a basket. Like in the basket is kind of very similar to what Renzo or EtherFi, etc. have. This is just one interface, a click, and you restake. And we're building isolated options for people that want to have a bit more composable exposure to it. Yeah, and that's basically the main difference. And I think the whole LRT space it's much more broad and advanced than just the LSD space, right? We can do much more. We can do more things with LRTs than we can do with LSDs, right? So we can build a basket of the Curve protocol that has things that might run on AVSs or Frax or Curvans, or like other things that might need like AVSs in the future in terms from a DeFi infrastructure perspective. But we can also have AVSs that do AI things or do data availability things or rollup things. So we're categorizing and isolating all these risks and giving kind of a clear exposure to that. So that's a bit of the difference compared to what the other protocols are doing.
Okay, so let me take a step back and see if I can get this right. So it sounds like there's going to be like multiple collateral assets which will be able to be used inside of YieldNest. Is that right? Other than the kind of native liquid restaking, and then also the LSDs as well too. You mentioned like Curve and other things.
I think the best thing to do is go to our testnet. I can also share my screen and show the testnet, or show our like Figma that has a bit more alpha. I can do that.
Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah, let's go. Here we go. So actually, first going to show the testnet, right? So the testnet is Holeski, that YieldNest.finance, right? You can check it out yourself. There's no points, the money's all fake, it's all on Holeski. We're going live on the 8th of May, so nothing is live yet. And you can see that here, right? So you come in and you can see here, okay, there's liquid restaking tokens. These are basically an NLRT and just the LRT, right? And these two are ways to enter into the liquid restaking position. These are the easiest way to do so. And you can see here there's different categories, right? Because all these AVSs and all these restaking protocols will eventually need to select operators to delegate their ETH to, or their other assets to, and then that will be delegated to active validated services that then can use those assets as crypto economic security, right? But the danger with that is if you just restake to everything, you might get slashed, or there's a lot of risks involved, right? And we make sure that these baskets consist of like different clear categories. And you can see that here in our Figma a little bit better, right? And don't ignore like all the things you see here, because this is really drafty, but it kind of displays what we're trying.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Let me actually,
just on the
maybe
Figma.
I could go here. It's a bit easier to understand here, right? I think this is easier to understand, right? So we give like a controlled AVS exposure, I call it, right? So where we have a curated basket of AVSs, which could be the YieldNest ETH or YieldNest LSD. That's how you can enter in the restaking system, right? Then those baskets give you a kind of controlled exposure to a set of different AVSs that the YieldNest protocol kind of curates and selects for its users, right? Or you can have an isolated AVS category where you say like, well, this curated basket is all nice, but I kind of don't really like to give like my assets to something that's secured, a rollup or like a security or something. I only want to have exposure to AI related AVSs, right? So then you can also go there and just restake only to that AI AVS category. That's what we're building out. And by doing so, we're not only making it easier to manage risk, we're also making it kind of like giving people the ability to really focus on which category they want to back their assets with, right?
Right. And so I understand it. So there's like the top line offering is this YNETH, which gives you exposure to a broad basket of everything. And then if you don't want that, you could come in and say, oh, hey, I just want AI exposure, or hey, I just want like DeFi exposure, or I just want like Oracle exposure. And they would all have their own different yields that they're providing and different risks.
Exactly. And the best way to compare it, like it's just the above things are like the ETFs, and that's how you also enter the system. And below that are more the individual indexes or individual shares or stocks that you can restake to. And this is also really good from an operator perspective, right? Because there is in EigenLayer, we basically have something called there is an operator, there's restakers, and there's active validated service AVSs, right? These operators also have a little bit of an issue because they're like, what AVSs should I run, right? Well, with YieldNest, we will be able for operators to build like kind of ready-made packages that they can run, right? So that's easier. For the restaker, it's easier. And for the AVS, it's also easier because we're building this risk framework together with the YieldNest risk team, basically operated by Llama Risk, and we are building this like kind of framework to onboard different AVSs. So we're building an AVS risk framework. We're also building a node operator framework, and making it like all a little bit more easier for people to understand what they're actually putting their money behind. I always make a funny joke, like if you put your money in a bank, you restake to the current financial system, right? So you're restaking to the CeFi system. If you put your money in YieldNest, you're restaking to a decentralized system, and we will, select, and you basically are backing systems that will make the world more decentralized and make the future vision of why we're all here, I assume. No, there's yields involved, there's high yields involved as well, but also it supports also a vision of more decentralization and sovereignty as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's really awesome. I think the products that we talked about before, are they doing the same thing? Like when we look at EtherFi or Renzo, are they just going to have like a singular AVS set that they run for their entire protocol?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird, to be honest. I don't really understand what they're doing. It's like I'm just looking at it and I'm like, yeah, a lot of things in the restaking space are a bit unsure, right? The market is definitely front running this new DeFi primitive. There's a new DeFi primitive and everybody's jumping on it. But a lot of things are around it are not 100% clear yet, right? And I think it's better to be honest about that and trying to envision a future where it does make sense. And that's what I'm trying to do with YieldNest, right? And what EtherFi and the other ones are doing is just having one basket and then restaking to that certain basket, right? That's it, right? And that's the strategy. And that's what I mean. And there's room for both. There's room for a LRT like YieldNest, where we are very focused, like farm airdrops or focused farm on or get yield on certain categories, right? We make it more composable, etc. There's a room for that, but maybe some people want to choose a very safe option like EtherFi and be like, oh, I trust EtherFi to select all the good AVSs and things like that, right? With YieldNest, there's a bit more composability and a bit more risk management for the sovereign individual to use. Yeah.
I mean, if anything, you could argue that there's too much security that's being provided in these LRTs because they'll have like one singular set of AVSs that they're going to provide for. So, do you really need to provide $5 billion worth of security for a protocol which is only generating, I don't know, a couple of $1 million a year in revenue, right?
Yeah, that's the other funny thing, right? Because you can think about it like that, and I do think we will get pretty high risk AVSs. I was talking this morning to an AVS, like an AI trading bot or something, and they want to use like restake collateral as backing for some of the trading strategies or something like that with junior or senior tranches and stuff like that, right? That is what AVSs are also going to be used for potentially in the future. People are already exploring that. So the whole restaking thing is going to get quite insane in the future. So yeah, there is going to be a lot of things that are going to come out soon. That's all I can say. But it's going to get quite crazy, right? We'll see not 100, but we will see thousands or thousands of like different of these active validated services that are all using this crypto economic security in different ways, are going to give really high yields, low yields, and just having one basket to be like, no, I don't think that will serve the restaking space fully. I think we need to have a lot of different categories. Next week, actually, for together with the YieldNest risk team operated by Lamaris, we're going to release an article about active validated services and how to categorize them. So what kind of different categorizers do we have? What kind of types do we have? And what kind of types of trusts will that entail, right? And that is going to be released. And I think that will educate the market a lot. And we're trying to collaborate with different partners to distribute that research, and obviously also I will share that with Leviathan news and everything. So
I would think that post Eigen Day, once the airdrop is over, those yields collapse way towards whatever the LSD yields are, and there's going to be a reckoning in the market.
I'm not so sure. I think that with custom slashing enabled, and you need to understand that EigenLayer is not the only restaking platform, right? There is now restaking on Bitcoin. There is restaking on Solana. There is restaking everywhere, right? So what we're going to see, it's a fight on what is the best settlement layer, right? That is going to be a fight. And you get all these different chains, Monarch and all these different chains, they use this kind of shared security model to hash their state into ETH or in other chains, how they want to. So it's going to be a very interesting time to see how that will evolve. And all these things, a lot of AVSs are raising a lot of money right now. So I'm not sure. I think there's going to be a lot of airdrops, farming, and a lot of different yield opportunities in the future.
My thing is that EigenLayer has $15 billion worth of TVL right now.
Yeah.
And so, we're talking about generating like an extra percent here. It's $150 million worth of value that has to come from somewhere. So it either has to be like more points farming from the individual AVSs at these super high FTVs for people to sell into to capture the yield, or I think we've talked about this before, but like post EigenLayer day, once all EigenLayer comes out, I know they're going to have a huge backlog of tokens that they could distribute over the next 10 years to keep the yields high. But I think at a more mature state, at least in this early period of AVSs, adding on 0.5% or like 1% on the total of whatever the yield is probably is where we're going to settle to. And so the craziness that's happening in the market right now, where we're seeing fixed yields.
I think it's going to get way more crazier than that, because I think there's going to be all these chains that will compete for users or VSTake capital. So it's going to all these different layer 2s, all these different
But we
AVS.
talked about, but I just brought this up, is that you have these like monolithic LRT providers that will have like a very conservative set of AVSs that they're providing for, and probably like all the LRTs provide services for those few AVSs. And so that means that whatever yield they're capturing is going to be diluted across the entire $15 billion base. And so it's up to, say, something like YieldNest here to provide other options that people could come in and say, okay, I want to go into something with a bit more on the risk curve that's providing higher yields at the moment, but just doesn't get gobbled up into the fully aggregated basket of whatever the monolithic LRT providers are offering.
That's an amazing point indeed. Yeah, that's a really good point actually, Sam. Because like, the main LRTs, if you just basket it, and if you want to be super safe, the yield is not going to be that high, right? So you will need to move up the risk curve, and that means that you might have to explore some categories that might a little bit more risky, or that is going to happen, and that's why we're designing it so that there is this basket option, similar to what the other LRTs have as well. And there is this kind of like isolated option where you can go a little bit higher up the risk curve, potentially. But yeah, that's up to the user themselves how to configure that. And eventually, like, YieldNest is going to be a protocol. So YieldNest wants to be a DAO. In the beginning, it's a bit more centralized because there's a lot of open questions still around EigenLayer. But eventually, it's going to be a complete DAO with like sub-DAOs and everything, where users can come with ideas of different AVS categories or packages and things like that. And that is the end goal of the protocol.
What do you think about all this, Dr. Zer?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting. And I think people will, like, at the end of the day, like looking years into the future, probably yields collapse back down to, like the safe yield that either US Treasuries post or, that you're going to get in the more traditional stock market type. And so people are, like you said, people are going to have to choose their risk level if they want higher yielding structures, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think we have some time before that, and easy option for EigenLayer, just don't drop token. Yield stay. Yeah. No, I joke, but
no, it's true. It's kind of true.
Like just keep pushing out, just like the Bitcoin ETF. Just keep pushing it out, and price continues to go up. But no, I think like what YieldNest is trying to do, and get a different set of AVS, or kind of basket those to people's risk preference, definitely opens up a lot of optionality. Are you guys going to win Pendle partnership?
Yeah, so like I'm actually quite conservative with that, but of course we're already talking with Pendle and things like that, right? But we first, on the 8th of May, will initiate the protocol, right? So any deposits will then open, and then we have this special like point program where we kind of want to reward the early users and adopters of the YieldNest protocol to be fully rewarded and included into this DAO and governance structure that we want to set up. And then probably like after X time, we are going to split up curve pools and other pools, and then slowly we'll work our way towards also fixed yields and things like that. And in a very educated way, like saying like, okay, you want to what do you want to do? You want to earn, like, I'm not even sure if incentive. Yeah, but I'm not even sure if I want to incentivize Pendlifying ourselves like that. So I'm open to these kind of options, or Napier or Pendle or other, like there's a lot of different options there, right? So, but of course it will be Pendle. We're talking to them already, but I want to do something longer term. Like I'm trying to do that, but of course also we want to give a lot of options to do a lot of crazy stuff as well. It's up to the user themselves at the end of the day. Yeah.
Did I miss it? Did you say just layer 1, or are you guys going to be launching on any layer 2s?
Well, I had just a call with layer 0, so we're going to announce a partnership with layer 0. So we're going to obviously also bridge to many different chains, starting with Arbitrum, base optimism, and also talking with Sam from Frax. So we're also going to bridge to Fraxtal. I really like their their page rank system and the flux design, how they build it. So that's very interesting. So that we're gonna move to there as well. And this is standard Arbitrum base optimism. Start there and then explore different options from that spot. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how all this plays out once AVS is already live, right?
AVSs are live, but so we're going to publish an article also next week about the risk framework and risk analysis on EigenDAA, which is one of the first AVSs, right? And we're going to be very direct and open about like how that works, what are the risks involved, what are the challenges still that there need to be overcome to build this into a fully fledged like active validated service. And we're going to release that. Right now there's no yields on AVSs, right? So it's all kind of like pre-real thing that goes live, or the real yields go live. That was coming very soon. And there is some risk involved in it already. And we're going to release information about that next week.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Amazing.
I'm excited to see how YieldNest goes. And
yes, I'm very excited as well. And I want to encourage everybody to check out like our Twitter for sure. Go to YieldNest. And the 8th of May, we need everybody's help because we want to show that there is still like some longer term vision in the people. Like that we are a longer term LRT protocol that looks at the actual AVS categories. That's like really deep risk analysis frameworks, and it's here to stay. So people that want to earn a part of YieldNest or be part of that journey, like deposit your ETH on the 8th of May, and there's some really cool things in store. And on Friday we have a really cool Twitter Spaces with Wavy and Naga King and myself, and maybe some other people might join as well. And we're going to talk about our like DeFi integrations and setup, and we're building this really cool new withdrawal flow, like talking about Renzo, right? We're actually like engineering a kind of like pretty cool new innovative way to kind of bridge that gap, right? I did a lot of research into liquid lockers on CRV and other things, and there's always this problem in DeFi, right? Like, oh, you have maturity, you have this, you have that, and there's ways to mitigate that, to be like, okay, and then we're going to talk about like deep DeFi stuff. So we're going to nerd on Friday around 6 p.m. Bangkok time.
Very nice. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. It was a great discussion with Dio and Dr. Zur. Also great to have you here as well too.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Really good call, and looking forward to seeing everybody on the 8th of May.
We'll look forward to that Twitter space. Try to log on for that.
And
nice, thank you.
If you've made it this far, make sure to come to Leviathan _ news at both Twitter and Telegram. The month is about to wrap up, and we'll be distributing squid points soon. For anybody that's submitted news or minted the NFTs on pods.media, which there's actually been a lot of you. This has been great. It's been really nice to see everyone minting the Leviathan NFTs. You can still come and mint some NFTs on pods.media. Pretty great way to earn some points. We've seen some of these like 10 on that risk one. They're only like a $1 or $2. So come to pods.media. It's in the show notes, and mint a couple of NFTs. And we'll be back tomorrow. I think we're going to be talking about CZ and a couple of other big events that have been happening over the last few days, which we didn't get to cover today. So it should be fun.
Crazy.
Bring back Jailcast.
Yeah, Jailcast.
Jailcast.
We talked about
it's
a double Jailcast this week. Monday, we talked about the Z Casino rug. And tomorrow we get to talk about CZ. So Jailcast all the way.
Exciting. Awesome, guys. Amazing.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.